everybody. Welcome to the stream. It's weird. When I was booting this up with YouTube, with the, what was it? Oh, sorry about that. Post Facebook. When I was booting up the stream with YouTube, it was telling me that I wasn't getting enough signal and it would be buffering on you guys' end. So if anything does go wrong at all throughout the stream, please do let me know. I don't know what exactly I could do to fix a shoddy internet connection necessarily, but I will, I'll try to be as accommodating as I can. But anyways, yes, welcome to another episode of Rezi Reviews, the series where we take a look at bands, discographies. We rank them usually. We talk a bit about their history, and today, we've got a pretty big band to cover today. At least in terms of influence, if not discography. Thank God, I had roughly half the amount of albums that I covered the last two streams to cover today. Only 9 albums, but it's a hell of a stylistic shift that happened within only those 9 albums. We're of course talking today about heavy metal band Pantera. And for those of you who don't know, hold on a second. My gosh, I am sorry. I just got caught flat-footed here, and sorry. Give me 1 second. Okay, so okay, so this is really embarrassing. At some point when I was setting up for the stream, I accidentally clicked I clicked to sign out of YouTube, and it booted me out of all of my fucking Google accounts. So the notes that I had up for the stream, I need to do a bunch of password recovery and shit for right now. So give me 1 second. I'm totally sorry about this. Yeah. God damn it. Fuck you. Okay. Alright, save that. Come on! For fucking... Give me... Okay. Yeah, alright, there we go. Okay, come on. Yeah, just continue with the fucking account. Yeah, okay. Sure. Continue. Sorry about that. Okay, we're back in business. So yeah, we are here today to talk about Pantera, an American heavy metal band that was formed all the way back in 1981. Though, actually, they're storied rocker on bass. So with this lineup established, the band entered the studio, and with the assistance of good old Papa Jerry Abbott, who actually would go by the nickname The Eldon on future credits on the next few Pantera albums, they would record an entire album when they were all still essentially teenagers. Diamond, he was only 17 when he recorded this album. The others weren't that much older. They were, I think the maximum age in the band at that point was basically 19 years old. The album that they recorded, Metal Magic, it would eventually come out in 1983 under an independent label of the same name. And man, can I just say, it must have been, these guys were so lucky to have a cool dad like that, with the connections to just make something like that happen. 1983, independent music wasn't the thing it was now, where you have, it's easier than ever to, sort of independently distribute your own music. Back in 1983, this was considerable. It's just but that being said, and I say this from personal experience too, when you're in your teens and you're making music influenced by all your favorite bands and artists, and you're putting it out there, sometimes you're a little more confident in your ability to make a classic album than is actually warranted. And I mean, unless you're like Jacob Collier, but Metal Magic is very much not that. You see, not to judge an album by its cover, but this is the album right here. You see, yeah, the sort of cat, panther, man thing hybrid on here. What the hell is this? It's like the band, it's like they were clearly inspired by the fancy mythical rock and metal album covers of past bands like Rainbow, Uriah Heep, Molly Hatchet. It utterly exudes those vibes, but they went for something on the super cheap. I think they actually had a friend of the band to sign this album cover, and well, they got what they paid for. Look at this monster man thing. Its existence is pain, and I mean, you can't really see it that well from the smaller album covers you got on this tier list, but I don't know. You know what I mean. I look forward to seeing a live 2D model of this thing in my nightmares. But enough with the album cover proper. Let's talk about the music. And the album, it starts bizarrely enough with this fade in of synths and this sampled crowd noise, before you've got this corny narration that says, the world needs metal. We need Pantera, and then it goes into this Detroit Rock City-esque riff opening or something that sounds similar enough, and we go right into the opener. It's called Ride My Rocket. Oh boy, it's already starting off things strong with the sexual innuendos. But to be fair to the band, starting things off, the instruments right away are really strong. The Abbott brothers, Rex Brown, they're already showing great confidence at their instruments. Terry Glaze, the vocalist, on the other hand, he's not the worst singer he's not the worst rock singer in the world. He does a serviceable job in that 1980s metal band frontman sort of way. In the way that even though Yngwie Malmsteen is the draw for whatever band he's in and just needs a vocalist to sing the lyrics, Rising Force and all that, that's what we have here in early Pantera. Terry Glaze is competent on this album, just ultimately forgettable, and I'm sorry, some of the worst songs on this album are solely credited to him. We're gonna talk about them later, but he's not that good a songwriter on his own. So speaking of the music itself, it's very clearly hair metal inspired. There are songs about sex, love, rockin', so forth and so forth, undergirded by this really solid backing band. Like I said, Rex Rocker and the Abbott brothers, they're in great shape here. Some of the tracks, they're more tolerable than others, like the hard-chugging title track, Metal Magic, and the near funky Widowmaker. Some songs, they're a bit more imitative of Kiss. Like I said, Ride My Rocket sounds a lot like Detroit Rock City. But then you've also got Sad Lover, which is very, very Kiss sounding. Some of the songs are just straight bland 80s cheese, like complete with synths and everything. You got Tell Me If You Want It, Latest Lover, Biggest Part of Me, and Nothing On But the Radio. Like I said, a lot of those songs, they were written by Terry Glaze. Sorry, dude. Like, seriously, I don't even think that most hair metal bands were as gung-ho about synthesizers at this point as young Pantera was. Like, glam metal in 1983, it was Shout at the Devil, it was Breaking the Chains, it was Out of the Cellar. Raw, if reverberant metal that was built for an arena or a club, or, just a bunch of people to party and have a good time. But it still had a bit of an edge. Sure, you'd have your hammier, your synthier glam metals later on with your Cinderellas, your Europes, your Warrants. But glam metal here, it was a lot more aggressive, which the band, they don't quite stick to for the entire album. What is interesting is that you can hear bits and pieces of heavier Pantera, Pantera's future direction on some riffs and some songs like I'll Be Alright, Metal Magic, and Rock Out. They suggest a sort of faster, heavier approach, complete with breakdowns, but even despite the fact that it's clear that the Abbott brothers wanted to go heavier and faster, it's not enough to save the rest of the album, which just sounds like average 80s hair metal. There are a lot of great energetic performances, and it makes sense from that why Pantera would become such a popular underground live act in 1980s Texas, and we will talk a bit about that. But this album is a very juvenile effort, and it's not really worth revisiting outside of a few tracks. I am going to give it, Metal Magic here, a D. I'm gonna get some water here. So after Metal Magic came out, Pantera, they began to grow an underground sort of following in Texas. They were frequently called to perform at, clubs and events where alcohol was served in spite of their age. They were that hype in the Texas rock scene. It was great. But as the young band were cutting their teeth in clubs, meanwhile, heavy metal music in America was beginning to shift. While glam metal was still very much popular, bands from Los Angeles were on the rise, like I said, Motley Crue, Rat, and so forth. Thrash metal from the San Francisco Bay Area was also emerging at this time. You had, for instance, there was this young band named Metallica, which they actually caught the attention of Dimebag and Diamond and Vinny at the time. Diamond really loved the album, Ride the Lightning in particular, and actually at one point, according to Vinny, the brothers even apparently saw Metallica in the early days in some Texas club, and they even crashed, the band even crashed with them for the night. But in any case, the two young brothers were beginning to draw more cues from their contemporaries heavier than glam metal, and they took this into the studio with them when they recorded their follow-up album, Projects in the Jungle, which came out in 1984. Now, right from the start, I should point out, this is Projects here. It's got the album art is a bit better, but it's still kind of rough. It shows the band performing over top of a jungle atmosphere, in front of a bunch of, crowd of people. But right from the start, music-wise, it's apparent that the band's acquired a bit more of an edge from the previous album. All Over Tonight, the opener's got these mean riffs, these shrieked vocals from Glaze, and of course a killer solo from Dime and Daryl. And honestly, it's a bit more like an amped-up Def Leppard, which is already enough of an improvement from the past album. But then you've got the rapid-fire attack of Out for Blood, which is reminiscent of Judas Priest, and you realize hey, are these guys essentially taking what worked from the previous album and trying to improve on it? Did Metallica inspire a harder attack all around? Well, somewhat. It's still a bit inconsistent. The band, they continued to do their whole Def Leppard pyromania thing on songs like Fire, Only a Heartbeat Away, and the cheesily titled Heavy Metal Rules. It sounds fine if a little derivative. Synths do unfortunately return on In Over My Head, and they sound so cheesy behind the heavy chug of the guitar and the cowbell drum part, spoiling what I think is otherwise a decent song. There's also Taken My Life, which is kind of in a similar vein, and my god, what were they thinking ending the album with this cheesy mid-tempo snoozer? There are other aggressive tracks that follow up Out for Blood, and they are great. You know, the title track is a definite highlight. It's got this heavy guitar and double bass attack, which foreshadows some of the aggression to come on future albums, and I guess it's only fitting for a song called Project's darker sounding songs your young band has done to date, but there's also Killers, which is this thrilling song with incredible driving guitar work, and is it just me, or for this one, can you hear a bit of a strength beyond strength in the guitar work before the last chorus? I don't know. It might just be me listening a bit more into Pantera than they probably knew at the time, but I don't know. Yeah, it's echoes of the future, in my opinion. For how spotty this album can be, though, between like the thrash metal and the glam metal stuff, I can't understate how good Diamond Darrell's playing is. Even this early on in his life, he was still only like 18 when he recorded this, and he slays it on the entire album. There's even he even throws in his own little eruption type track on the album in the form of Blue Light Turning Red, and it's nice playing, if a little derivative, a little copycat of Eddie Van Halen. But also to compliment Terry Glaze, he delivers a much better performance on this album. He shrieks a lot more, and it sounds great. Sounds like your typical hair metal frontman. But if you don't really like that music, if you don't really like the shriek, high-pitched falsetto voice, sounds like you got your balls in a clamp, that sort of thing, it does kind of grate the longer you listen to the album. So fair warning there. Overall, I would consider this album good enough to be more than an improvement over the debut, but, I would still, I'd probably go back and listen to quite a few tracks if the mood struck me, but at the same time, it's still mostly derivative of the music of the time. It fails to really carve Pantera their own spot in the distinct 1980s glamosphere. Showface, this is my face. I'm a cat boy. I'm a lazy orange cat boy from New York City. This is me. But anyways, Projects in the Jungle, it's decent. It's a better album than Metal Magic, but it's still very much derivative. I'm going to give it a C. Pop that right up there. So, the band, after Projects, they continued onward in their glam ways. Vinny and Diamond, they fell further into a thrash metal rabbit hole meanwhile, and Terry Glaze, he wasn't really that happy about this. He preferred more of the anthemic or melodic tunes that the band were already producing. He didn't really like thrash metal's more guitar-driven music. This sort of creative tension between Glaze and the rest of the band, it would rear its head in 1985 when the band went into the studio again to record their third album, I Am the Night. Oh boy. Oh man. Where do I start with this one? Well, I guess from the very beginning I should say it doesn't really give the best impression. It starts with this song, Hot and Heavy, which is essentially the Def Leppard styled songcraft from the last album, dialed up to 11 with the corniest freaking lyrics in the world. And oh god, Oh my God! Are those synth-sounding drums? What the hell, Vinny? I mean, I know it was the 1980s, but Jesus Christ, that's not hot and heavy. Or are those just badly produced toms? I don't know. You know, at least Diamond Daryl does killer lead work, as usual. You know, Dimebag Daryl playing killer guitar. It's like saying water is wet, essentially. But really, the impression that I get right away from I Am the Night, which I should point out here, is this album right here, the one with the sort of, the pink crystalline thing. I don't know what that's supposed to be, just sort of spoopy thing. Yeah, the impression I get from I Am the Night, it's overproduced as hell. Because actually the following track, from Hot and Heavy, which is the title track, it's another killer speed metal tune, which might sound great, if not for all the damn studio overdubs and interventions and sound effects, and Terry Glaze he does this cheesy cackle, like, and there's still the fucking damn synth tom, whatever. It's not good. It does not sound good. And other songs on the album, they just sound, you know, plain old uninspiring. Daughters of the Queen, Come on Eyes, they're corny 80s rock tracks with Terry Glaze sounding his least inspired since Metal Magic. Right on the Edge, it's better, but only just because of Glaze's vocals and the needed solo section. Forever Tonight, oh my God. Forever Tonight is an unironic power ballad with falsetto vocals almost the entire way through. God, it is cheesy. Sometimes I think, and I wonder why the Terry Glaze era of Pantera isn't remembered more, and, you know, kind of like the Ripper Owens era of Judas Priest, which I covered last time, plug for my Pantera discography review stream if you haven't already checked that out, wink wink nudge nudge. But like the Ripper Owens Judas Priest, I think that the reason why Terry Glaze Pantera isn't more remembered, I think it's more to do with their inconsistent music than the fault of the singer himself, you know. Sorry, Terry, I think you would have been great in any other glam metal band, just not freaking Pantera, man, you know. Obviously, that's a problem that happened more in hindsight, but I'm sorry, it's true. Are there still songs on I'm the Night that sound good? Yeah, sure. You know, Onward We Rock, again, cheesy as the title is, does have some really good riffs. There's also the quick rocker Down Below, where Terry Glaze has some really cool, like, falsetto shrieks and howls and all that, and the same goes for the song Valhalla, but the production, how to say, it's almost, the production is almost never that far behind to leave them sounding insincere. It's almost like Ram It Down era Judas Priest in the way that it sounds like they're trying to tell more than show, if you know what I mean. You know, Diamond Daryl, he still contributes the stellar guitar work throughout the album. He does another Eruption style interlude in the form of Daryl Goes to the Movies, which is abbreviated as DGTTM. I think this one is supposed to come off as more comedic. There's more like funny sound effects of like a dude like just sort of grunting and whatnot. I don't know. But I don't know. I think Daryl's talent on this album sounds very underutilized. I mean, it kind of has for the past few albums, but you're about to see what I mean as we get into the following albums. Overall, what happened here? I mean, the band sounded so confident in the roller sound on Projects in the Jungle, but they really just let it all slip for a metal album that sounds so you know, the bland tracks, they're really bland, and the good tracks, they're brought down by this overly interrupted, cheesy 80s production. Like I said, the toms sound like synth drums. It's really bad. You know, I feel like the band are being torn two ways here between 80s glam cheese on the one hand and this heavier sound verging on thrash metal on the other, and it just doesn't gel. overall, I'm going to give this album, I Am the Night, a D. Yeah, it's really not good. So, continuing onwards, by 1986, creative differences between the Abbotts and Terry Glaze grew so wide that eventually the Abbotts just decided to can Terry altogether. So together with Brown, the brothers carried on with a few other singers for a time, which didn't really fit in various ways. I think one of them was like a David Coverdale sound-alike that couldn't actually sing any of their songs. But eventually they settled on this young Philip Anselmo from New Orleans, Louisiana. The singer immediately clicked with the other three, and he began sharing with them his mixtapes, including hardcore punk and I think some thrash acts like Exorder and Slayer. And the band, now with him, with Anselmo in the band, listening to all this new music, they were essentially in a feedback. They were in a feedback loop. They were gradually getting heavier and heavier the more they played together. But they were still young and inexperienced songwriters. So, I mean, hell, Phil Anselmo, he was 18 when he joined the band, 2 years younger than even Daryl. So this young band, they would eventually get together in the studio, they would record and release a new album, Power Metal, in 1988. So Power Metal, pointing it out right here with a cover. How does Pantera sound exactly on this new album with this new Nolans boy and the new music that they're taking in? Well, Phil Anselmo, he does more than fill in Terry Glaze's shoes. He injects this fierce Rob Halford-like punch to Pantera's vocal element. The production for this album, too, it's also mercifully a lot cleaner and less overproduced. That said, Pantera, they're still fundamentally rooted in glam rock. The corny songs are still there. You've got the more anthemic stuff like Rock the World, Proud to Be Loud, and Hard Ride, which are still unabashed glam arena stompers. But even these are slightly more energized, I would argue, by Anselmo's vocal delivery and Diamond's crunchier guitar tones. And actually, I'm kind of a sucker for Rock the World. That's low-key a bit of a guilty pleasure track of mine. We'll Meet Again. It's a more mid-tempo glam rock song, but its crunchy guitar, it has something interesting to begin with. Its crunchy guitar tone and Phil's spoken word vocal part, they sort of call to mind future Pantera. Until they bring in some tubular bells. And I mean, what the hell? Whose idea in Pantera was it to... Wait, Rex Brown? You can play the tubular bells? What the hell? Okay, color me surprised, but in spite of the 1980s cheese, which lingers, shit, when the band actually goes full metal, it's electrifying. The title track, it's not actually, the genre of power metal, but it is basically the best speed metal song that the band's made to date, sounding like something off of Judas Priest's Painkiller 2 years early. The same goes for, and again, the bands were still really cheesy with their titles at this point, Burn, which is another Priest-like pounder. Then there are Over and Out and Death Trap, which are probably the most Megadeth-sounding non-Megadeth songs I've ever heard. And you can tell the band are getting more and more comfortable here, mapping out heavier and heavier sounds with Phil at the helm, and the Abbott brothers constantly binging thrash records, because these songs, they fucking rock. I think they can easily stand their own with, at least Cowboys from Hell era Pantera. Down Below also gets a second chance on this album. They take it from I Am the Night, and, thankfully the album's sharper production and Phil's banshee wail, it manages to give it more life than on that album. Phil's vocal delivery on the whole, it's a dirty job, but someone's got to do it. That line, it's classic Anselmo swagger. Very much foreshadowing of what's to come. And then we've got the outro track, PST 88, which I think I might as well mention separately because it's the only song on the album, in fact, the only song in the band's discography to feature Diamond Daryl on the vocals, and it's a short joke track about sex. The refrain is, and I quote, "Pussy tight tonight, pussy tight, all right." Well, much in the way that Eddie Van Halen had his whole embarrassing, singing, written song that he sings moment with Honey Say I guess we can give this one to old Diamond here too, fair's fair. So what to make of this album, which is definitely, Pantera's heaviest venture to date? Well, it shows a band which has decidedly embraced aggression over glam commercial sheen. And when that aggression hits, it really hits hard. I love Death Trap, I love Over and Out, as I said. But some of that sheen, some of that glam sheen still clings to them in their subject matter and some of the riffs. Hell, look at the cover. It's literally clinging to them in their outfit. And you can't really see it from this far up. What is this? An album cover for ants? But Phil Anselmo looks utterly ridiculous. They all do, but Phil especially, who, build an image as sort of this heavy, brutal, tough guy. He looks so stupid here. But the band, they still hadn't 100% abandoned their comfort zone as a glam band. And this album appropriately shows them in a sort of awkward transitionary phase. Still, there's no doubt that the heavier tracks in the album are a fine precursor for what's to come. I wish the band at least acknowledged this one a bit more. I'm going to give this album a C. Not bad, not a bad album. In hindsight, not a bad album, not a bad metal album in its own right, but this is Pantera, and they would accomplish so much more. So, let's get into that so much more. The actual official Pantera albums. Yes, that's right. We are now finally out. What the hell's going on? Hello? Hello? Are we back? Oh my gosh, sorry. OBS disconnected there. Continuing onward, where was I saying? Yeah. Now, the band, they got together in this band meeting, and they were essentially like, these fancy clothes don't play the music, we do, let's just take them off, go casual, and see where it takes us. Meanwhile, musically, they were also getting heavier there, and other bands actually took notice at this time. Dave Mustaine of Megadeth, he even approached Diamond Daryl at this time about joining Megadeth. I think this was just after, what is it, So Far, So Good, So What, and the guitarist and drummer had left Megadeth again, as was typical in Megadeth's lineup. Diamond actually considered for a time. He did want to join Megadeth. I mean, shit. If you had the chance to join one of the big four bands of thrash metal, wouldn't you? But he ultimately turned Dave Mustaine down because Diamond conditionally wanted to join Megadeth along with his brother Vinny, but since Dave Mustaine had actually hired Nick Menza already for the drums in Megadeth, obviously he couldn't do that. Sidebar, but just fucking imagine Rust in Peace with the Abbott brothers playing on it. That would sound incredible. I don't know if it would sound the same, but it certainly would be a powerhouse of a record. I don't know. I'm just geeking out about what could have been. Still though, as for Pantera themselves, they weren't having much record finding. They weren't finding much luck finding a record label. They were turned down something like 28 individual times before finally, Atco Records representative Mark Ross, he went down to Texas in late 1989 to see the band perform at the behest of his boss for the records, and I think he was so blown away from that performance that he basically called his boss and told them to sign the band on the spot. So with that major label deal secured, Pantera would enter the studio with the producer Terry Date, and they aimed to create something that was distinctly them this time. Something that would set them apart from not just the glam scene, but the thrash scene as well. They drew influence at this time, not just from thrash metal and, all the heavier stuff going on, but from hardcore punk that, Anselmo was showing them, and also the bluesier, twangier music that surrounded them in Texas. ZZ Top, especially, with their sort of blues rock boogie, there would be a huge influence on Diamond Darrell's playing going forward. The results of these brewing efforts, the mixture of all these styles, the collaboration with Terry Date, would eventually drop in July of 1990 as Cowboys from Hell. And that is this album here, the sort of black and white photo here. It's an old-timey photo of a saloon, just with, the band members photoshopped in, and they're being all rambunctious and jumping around and being all like, yeah! Cowboys from Hell, that sort of mood. But, again, right from the outset of this album, like a few other albums before, it's clear that this band has undergone a huge tonal shift. The opener and the title track, Cowboys from Hell, it needs no introduction for die-hard metalheads, but basically it's a bona fide metal classic. It reintroduces the band as this hell-raising metal quartet from Texas. The drums and bass, they're still pounding in places, just like the sort of thrash songs that had come before in Pantera's discography. But they've also got this nice headbanging groove going elsewhere, and the guitar riffs are more melodic and groovier, while at the same time, sometimes also locking in rhythmically with the bass and drums to create this sort of pounding abrasion, like, it's very jagged, much more jagged than what's come before. And all the while, you've got Phil Anselmo over top with his gruff voice and shrieks, which verge on like screamo vocals, essentially. It's a perfect intro to the band's new sound. But, that's just the opener. They go further elsewhere on the album in their attempts to push the envelope. Primal Concrete Sledge is just this unrelenting crush of kick drum with syncopated guitar and bass chug, and it's almost harsh, hardcore punk-like vocals. Domination is this driving punk-like song with an immaculate drum work that eventually slows down to this doom metal-like crawl for a spine-tingling guitar outro, and that chorus, oh my god, it's domination pushed into a minivan, oh my god. And then you got Heresy. It's this incredible thrash-inspired song which sounds like a more polished Over and Out. It's got a more focused aggression, and Salmo even sings the line, "Lick my sack." It's punk, it's great. It's got this cool, groovy breakdown section with another great Diamond solo. I love that song. Heresy, it's a slapper. It's a banger. I love it. Then you've got, talking about some more deep cuts from the album, you've got Sleep, which has this simple but powerful as hell riff and an accompanying drum groove and even a bit of atmospheric acoustic guitar work, I should say. You got Medicine Man, which is this dark, creepy song about drug dealing and addiction. Then The Art of Shredding, the closer, is a thrilling 4-minute rush loaded with all sorts of guitar riffs and cool solo work. Give me 1 sec, just taking a sip of water. The band also attempts a ballad on this album in the form of Cemetery Gates, which, I mean, come on here. What hasn't been said about Cemetery Gates that hasn't been said a million fucking times? It's a perfect metal song about coming to accept the loss of a friend, and it alternates between these clean, groovy, and melancholic verses to more crunchy and driving choruses, and the solo section, oh my god, you see, this is what I was saying earlier about Diamond Darrell being underutilized during the band's glam era. On this track, he delivers a solo that's not only technically impressive, but emotionally heavy as well. Also, holy shit, Phil Anselmo. He really nails those shrill Rob Halford highs at the end of the song. Now, he wouldn't stay a Rob Halford sound-alike for long, for reasons we'll get into later, but shit, just imagine if he joined Priest after Rob Halford left instead of Tim Ripper Owens. I mean, overall, sorry, I was just tangenting there, but overall, Cemetery Gates is basically a perfect metal ballad, continuing the legacy of such great tracks as Judas Priest's Beyond the Realms of Death, in my opinion. In other parts, though, I don't know. The sonic experimentations of this album sound maybe a little undercooked. Psycho Holiday has this really cool chugging riff layered on top of a swung drum groove, but I don't know, this song doesn't really do that much for me until it switches things up at the end for a more straight-ahead feel. Shattered is this killer speed metal tune, which again sounds like something presaging Priest's Painkiller. It's fine, but not really in line with the other heavier tracks on the album. Clash with Reality is a fine song, but doesn't really get super interesting until the band gets super into it and faster towards the end. Message in Blood is this song sung from the perspective of Marilyn Manson about his cult's murders, and it's fine, I guess. I mean, the best part is when the song suddenly enters this swung section for Diamond Darrell's haunting multi-track solo. Very CC Top, but I don't know, the other riffs don't really do it for me. And for as cool as The Art of Shredding is instrumentally, its lyrics kind of verge on the cheesy flaminess of power metal Pantera, The world is all evil and full of corruption, and the only thing you can do is shred, heavy metal, guitar, yeah! That sort of thing. So, overall, how's this first official, quote-unquote, Pantera album? I mean, it's not bad for a start. The band were still evolving, they were still coming into their own metal sound at this point, but tracks like the title track, Primal Concrete Sledge, Domination, Cemetery Gates, and others show promise for Pantera at the margins of the extreme and the groovy. Unfortunately, the album is still relatively undercooked in other places. The 1990s album Rumtime Curse strikes again here, with this album lasting almost an hour thanks to some of the more filler tracks. It's a great album, but I feel like it could have been honed a little bit better. I'm going to put Cowboys from Hell in the B tier. Alright. So, picture this. Cowboys from Hell was out. The band was finally on a mainstream label. There was just one small problem. No one knew who the hell this new Pantera was. So in order to rectify this, the band decided to hit the road nonstop for a year, engaging in what they called the Do or Die Tour. They toured America and Europe with heavy metal heavyweights like Exodus, Suicidal Tendencies, Sepultura, Fate's Warning, Morbid Angel, and even Judas fucking Priest, one of the Darrell brothers' favorite bands growing up. Essentially, they were just getting out there trying to play to as many heavy metal fans as possible, trying to earn a reputation for themselves. And with their relentless live performances, they did win a sizable following and enough of a reputation to play at the Monsters of Rock Festival in the Soviet Union in 1991 in front of, I think it was, 500,000 screaming Russians. But the band were hungering for yet more. You see, in 1991, Metallica, who, as I said, had long been a strong thrash influence on Pantera, released their more commercially oriented Black album, self-titled Metallica, but referred to in the vernacular as the Black Album. The album, as probably some of you know, was a smash hit. Enter Sandman, The Unforgiven, Nothing Else Matters. They all charted in the US Top 40 and they became staples of rock radio. The album, it would later be certified diamond, so altogether, very, very solid commercial success for the band. But to thrash metal diehards, including the Abbott brothers, the kings of heavy metal had embarrassed themselves. Pantera then saw Metallica's throne as ripe for the taking, and they aimed to make their follow-up to Cowboys from Hell their heaviest record yet. This album, Vulgar Display of Power, would come out in 1992, and, well, the rest is fucking history. So, where do I start here? Oh boy. In general, this album is a heavier beast than the ones that came before it for a few reasons. And I guess, as is typical, let's talk about the album cover first. Look at this thing. It's a literal picture of a guy getting socked in the face. You can't get any more aggressive or violent or brutal than just that. It's great. It's the perfect encapsulation of their new sound. But, to actually talk about that sound itself, the guitar and bass, they've been down-tuned on a number of tracks, and their tones have been near-matched to create this unified slab of, abrasive string sound. It's great. And additionally, Anselmo, he may still sing melodies here and there, but influenced more by hardcore punk by this time, he dispensed with the Halford falsetto altogether in favor of more guttural bellows. The band, they still do go thrash metal level fast and bust out groovy melodic riffs as they did on the previous album, but now, I don't know, the unity of sound makes these quirks pop and rage unlike never before. This is a metal band that sounds fucking pissed, which, keep in mind, in terms of mainstream metal at least, for 1992, this was still a new fucking thing. A very new thing. Yeah, sure, you had thrash metal, you had death metal, but these bands were still very much on the margins of commercial success. This, though, it was an entirely new thing. So, the opening 4 tracks, they still are an electrifying listen to me after multiple listens of this album. The album opens with Mouth for War, which is this absolute rager of the song with a killer first riff, an extended thrash outro. Then you've got A New Level, which alternates between this eerie ascending doom metal riff and these simple chugging parts reminiscent of hardcore punk. All the while, Phil Anselmo is screaming his guts out about, A new level! God, I cannot do a Phil Anselmo impression, I'm sorry. Then Walk comes, the 3rd track, and it's the big track of this album, and arguably Pantera's signature song. If you've heard a Pantera song, it's probably this one. And it just immediately clicks. The chunky riff, the chanted chorus, the wickedly southern sounding guitar solo, it's so aggressive and energizing. It just demolishes the old style of arena metal song the band were trying to write before in favor of something more violent. It was still a stomper. It could still get the crowd going, but it wasn't cheesy. It was violent. It was aggressive. It was threatening. But, this song is all well and good, but, it sort of fades into the distance, but, just when you think you got time to rest, wham! The band slaps you, and so you got the fucking breakneck fucking hostile. Is literally the name of the song, fucking hostile, which just bleeds anger through its thrash riffs and Anselmo's furious vocal delivery, and damn, oh my gosh, the album slows down a bit after this, but god damn, what a fucking rush of an opening. And now when I say the album slows down after these first 4 songs, I don't mean that it dips in quality. Honestly, the album is far better paced than Cowboys. There's nothing that I would necessarily consider filler. and each aggressive track on the album, outside of the singles, is its own badass thing. You know, Rise is a song with this brilliant thrash drive and surprisingly revolutionary message. Then you got No Good, Attack the Radical, which is a mid-tempo banger with groovy riff after groovy riff. While Live in the Hole, it's driven by this beastly bluesy riff, while Regular People Can See has this great syncopated riff underlying its aggressive and surprisingly catchy chorus, while By Demons Be Driven, it's more driven by the guitar and bass to a chilling effect. No, I said that wrong. It's a more abrasive track, By Demons Be Driven. It's driven by this killer double kick part, and it's matched by the guitar and bass. And, you know, it's just this very chilling sort of groove. Oh my god, I love it. But what else? Yeah, no, that's all to say. There's a lot of variety in how the band delivered this new metal attack this time, each as effective as the last, if you ask me. But there's also the two big ballads of the album, and I know what you're thinking. 2 ballads on Pantera's heaviest album so far? So what are they like? I mean, honestly, they fit right in with the rest of the album's aggression. This Love is the song about broken, failed relationships, which alternates between these clean verses and an eerie, arpeggiated guitar riff courtesy of Dimebag, and then these violent, aggressive verses and sludgy breakdowns on the other hand. It's an absolute tour de force of the song, and every time you listen to it, I think you notice something a bit more, I don't know. It never really feels old, it always feels fresh. But then Hollow, which is the closer of the album, is even better in my opinion. It's a really dark song. The lyrics are based on a friend of Anselmo's who was sent into a coma by a car accident. And you know, Anselmo, in the song, he laments his friend's state and even expresses anger with God over it. Meanwhile, the music, oh man, the first half of the song is this hauntingly beautiful melodic ballad with one of the coolest dual guitar lines you'll ever hear in a song. But then the second half, it's this full-on headbanging stomper with all these crunchy riffs and a brilliant jam on a riff between Diamond, Vinny, and Rex. And it closes the album that way. It just fades off into the distance of these metal musicians jamming and stomping and closing around. It's such a superb closer to this album. Emotional, beautiful, and above all else, heavy. Oh my god. So, I mean, if it isn't already obvious by the fact that I'm barely hiding my excitement for this album, it's my opinion that this album is an easy S tier. Give me 1 second. Yep, there we go. Right there. Yeah, Pantera, they absolutely knocked it out of the park with this album. And they brought out a sound that was seemingly even uglier than thrash to the mainstream in the process. Even almost 30 years after its debut, I would argue that all the songs on this album easily stand toe-to-toe with the music by thousands of metal bands which would later be inspired by Pantera and deliver their own forms of progression. Seriously, if you like modern metal with down-tuned guitars or screamo vocals in any form and you've never listened to this album, you are doing yourself a serious disservice. Go listen to this fucking album. Seriously, I cannot stress that enough. But, anyways, moving onward. Vulgar display of power. It was propelled by the band's continued touring and music video rotation on MTV. Fun fact, Beavis and Butthead loved them some Pantera. And this would catapult the band to new heights. They were playing larger, more raving crowds, and they'd even caught the attention of the Texas-based game devs id Software, who were to ape a few songs from Vulgar Display of Power for the soundtrack of their upcoming FPS Doom. Meanwhile, Diamond Daryl, he was at the point where he felt like his nickname no longer really suited the band's heavier sound, so he adopted the new nickname, the one that you better know him as, Dimebag. The reason that he has this nickname is because, owing to archaic drug laws in Texas, he didn't want to carry anything. He didn't want to carry more than a dime bag worth of weed on him at a time for fear of, getting busted by cops and punished. It's a fittingly edgy, gritty name for a fittingly edgy and gritty band. Speaking of dark, though, the Pantera, for their follow-up album to Vulgar, they wanted to go heavier still. It makes sense, honestly. By this time, Pantera's new sound, what you would call now groove metal, it caught on in bands like Prong, White Zombie, and Machine Head. They were attracting their own followings at this time. I guess seeing the need to distinguish themselves as the master of this new emerging metal subgenre, Pantera went full throttle with the next album, Far Beyond Driven, which came out in 1994. I'll admit, it's a bold ambition to go heavier than what was arguably one of the heaviest things in the mainstream metal market circa 1992. So, how did they do? Well, speaking generally first, yes, this album is definitely a more wicked beast than its predecessor in some ways. Continuing with the trend of aggressive, violent metal covers, this one here for Far Beyond Driven has, a skull being pierced by a drill bit. And actually, it was going to be a lot more vulgar. They wanted to have an ass getting pierced by that same drill bit, but the record label quickly put a kibosh on things, so we don't get metal up your ass. But, again, moving from the album cover to the music itself, there are more harsh shrieks in Dimebag's guitar riffs, making more creative use of a wah-wah pedal. There's a tighter, more concentrated double kick lead attack in the rhythm section. And Anselmo in most songs just dispenses with melody altogether. He prefers to just gutturally bellow for much of the album. It's certainly a stronger sound than before, and in some places I think this really works in the album's favor, but, well, it can also work against it too, as we're gonna get into later. Once again, the opening 4 tracks of the album are all stellar. Strength Beyond Strength and Becoming lead the album off with this cocky aggression, featuring Phil Anselmo shrieking about the band's newfound power and growth into the beast that they were. Over top these pulverizing thrash grooves and harsh guitar riffs. The chorus in Becoming is so simple but powerful. I'm born again with snake's eyes, becoming God's size, and I feel like that's a principle that the band carries forward with them for the rest of the album. Simple but just aggressive and heavy hitting, because then we get the two big singles of the album, 5 Minutes Alone and I'm Broken, and holy God, you guys. These 2 songs may rightfully be some of the best Pantera's ever recorded. The first is this mid-tempo, almost doom-like chug with multiple different groovy riffs and breakdowns and a beast of a solo section where Anselmo delivers this pissed-off vocal about some punk that wants to mess with him. And actually, this song was inspired by an incident at one of Pantera's concerts where I think it was they were opening for Megadeth, and one of Megadeth's fans was heckling them, and I think they stopped the concert because of this douchebag and basically called him out, and a bunch of people in the crowd would jump in, beat him up. Then later on, the kid's parent would later get in contact with Pantera's management and would be chewing them out and be like, give me 5 minutes alone with this Phil Anselmo fella for, putting my son in danger or something like that. Phil Anselmo heard this story and he was like, that's cute. Yeah, sure, give me 5 minutes alone with the guy. I'll fucking knock his lights out. And, hence the song. It's a very, very cocky, cocksure, aggressive song. It's such an angry tune. It's guaranteed to make your head bang. And then you've got I'm Broken to follow it up. And it's an utterly brilliant song too. It's got this brilliant bluesy set of guitar riffs, including some rather creative use of duple meter rhythms over triple meter guitar and bass, and Anselmo's howling all the time about his own pain. And that chorus, again, so simple but powerful. I'm broken! Oh my god, love it! So much. Oh my god. From there though, the album gets a bit inconsistent. In its efforts to get darker and edgier, the album includes this song called Good Friends and a Bottle of Pills. It's essentially just this bass and drum jam underneath a bunch of overdubs of Phil Anselmo murmuring and shrieking some vulgar shit about sex or whatever. It might make for great New York City slam poetry, but for Pantera, it's kind of a bizarre inclusion. You've also got Hard Lines, Sunken Cheeks, which is the slower tune, almost doom metal tempo, and it's got a dark, effective song. It's a dark, effective song about the toll that drug addiction takes on the person, but it doesn't exactly stick with me too much beyond the main riff. Shedding Skin kind of starts off average, but then takes off from the tempo doubles. Then you've got Use My Third Arm, which has some really cool ideas, especially when it slows down with the gnarly Sabbath-like riff in the middle, but it ultimately feels like a jumbled slab of aggression. I don't know. That said, I fucking love Slaughtered. It's got this amazing thrash-like guitar riff with this incredible kick drum accompaniment. Phil, meanwhile, is spitting fire against the hypocrisies of Christianity in true metal style. And of course, you've got a simple, heavy chorus. Phil's just here fucking screaming, Slaughtered! And it's incredible. It's just great. 25 Years was also a damn good song about Anselmo's problems with his father, while you got Throes of Rejection. It's got this incredible pounding tom and double kick drum part that drives the verses in a really primal way. And of course, gotta admire the chorus, Rejection! Ah, my god, so good. But that's pretty much it for the album, but interestingly enough, after Throes of Rejection fades away, the album closes on a cover of Atlantic Caravan by Black Sabbath, and the cover's great, don't get me wrong. These Texans, they clearly understand Black Sabbath inside and out, and they do definite justice here. Dimebag's clean solo, it's straight Tone Iommi, but, I'm just confused why they decided to close this album on it. The rest of the album until now has been this wall of anger, and they just decided to end it on a chill, heady, psychedelic tune. I don't get it. Overall, though, there's a lot to love here with Pantera's attempt to Undriven. It's definitely a heavier record. It's definitely a heavier record for what it's worth. But overall, I think that the songwriting on this one isn't as consistent as it is on Vulgar. When it hits hard. Honestly, 5 minutes alone and I'm Broken would themselves qualify any metal album for an instant B tier at least. But there are some songs on the album that just don't have as much staying power in spite of their immediate, aggressive sonic impact, which makes this album a little less than perfect. As such, I am going to end up putting it in the A tier. Alright. So then. What's next? What is... Oh boy, I love this next one. So Far Beyond Driven was actually a bit of a commercial smash hit. It went straight to #1 on the US charts upon release, which think about that for a second. Let that sink in. The metal landscape had shifted so dramatically from 10 years ago, where only hair metal garnered commercial success on the American charts. Like, I was actually looking into it before this stream, and I think like the only major like 80s metal albums to get any sort of success were like glam metal stuff like Quiet Riot and Bon Frickin' Jovi. But now, Pantera, they were the very ones practically steering the shift in metal's new commercial direction. The band, they continued to tour and live up to their live notoriety, and of course they continue to attract a serious following on the road. But see, all the while, Phil Anselmo was suffering. How to say this charitably? He'd blown out some discs in his back while performing live, and I mean, you could probably tell if you go back and watch any live footage of old Pantera concerts, like, holy shit, the dude is constantly dipping over to, like, retch out, like, all these, like, extremely powerful notes, and that can't have been good for his back long term. But yeah, now he blew out his back live, essentially, and, you know, it caused him some immense pain, but instead of getting this corrective surgery, which would have put him out of commission for about a year, you know, pretty bad for a band as active as Pantera, he did stubbornly decide to soldier on. He self-medicated himself with alcohol, painkillers, and eventually heroin, which he would keep a secret from the band, at least for the time being. So his live performances, they became a lot more violent, a lot more erratic. He'd often insult crowd members and go on rants, including times where he promoted white pride and stated that rap music promoted the killing of white people. You know, the sort of blatantly bigoted shit that he must have never confronted within himself that was now bubbling to the surface now that drugs loosened his aggressive inhibitions. He even assaulted the security guard at the show and was later sentenced to 100 hours of community service for it. Needless to say, there was a growing rift between him and the rest of the band. By the time they'd finished demoing the follow-up to Far Beyond Driven, tensions had gotten so bad between the two camps, between Anselmo and the rest of the band, that while Dimebag, Vinny, and Rex were recording their parts in Dallas, Anselmo holed himself up in Trent Reznor's Nothing Studios in New Orleans for his vocal overdubs and to also nurse his addictions in private. From these troubled sessions, we would get the Great Southern Trendkill, which was released in 1996. And it's this album here, the one with the cobra on the front, or the rattlesnake, would that be? I don't know. Might be a rattlesnake. Whichever one, sticking its black tongue out and just hissing. Very nasty critter in any case. But as for the music, the band's separation, all their tensions, it did nothing to really halt their aggression. In fact, I think it only ratcheted it up only further. The band, they were seemingly committed to making a heavier record still, and holy crap, it shows. The Great Southern Trendkill is the heaviest, darkest, most bitter Pantera album that they ever made. And spoiler alert, it's my personal favorite Pantera album. Not only does the production make the instruments sound slightly more dry and brittle this time, but they're buzzing along in some songs at absurd tempos. Vinnie Paul plays blast beats, Rex Brown and Dimebag go full Slayer, and Phil, oh my god, Phil! So at this point, hopped up on alcohol, pain medication, and heroin, he completed his transformation from a Rob Halford sound-alike to a guttural monster. His screams on this album are some of the most visceral, haunting vocals he's ever done, and I mean, the fucking intro title track alone, it literally opens with a scream that still sends chills up my spine every time I hear it. And Anselmo actually wasn't alone screaming his guts out in the booth. Guest starring on a few songs with some screaming vocals of his own is Seth Putnam of Anal Cut. And because this is probably the only chance that I'm ever going to get to talk about these guys, have you guys ever heard of the band Anal Cut? They are a Massachusetts grindcore band that, you know, as I said, was fronted by this dude named Seth Putnam. And they are famous for just making the most bottom of the barrel, offensive fucking songs like on the face of the earth. That's their entire shtick. You might know them from such classics as You're Pregnant, So I Kicked You in the Stomach, I Lit Your Baby on Fire, Connor Clapton committed suicide because his father sucks, later renamed Your Kid Committed Suicide Because You Suck, so that the band wouldn't get sued by Eric Clapton. And also vile Nazi shit, like I sent concentration camp footage to America's Funniest Home Videos, and Hitler was a sensitive man. So, yeah, there was that element of the band, but also Seth Putnam himself was also a bit of an asshole, also very much a heavy drug addict, was into heroin. In fact, I think there's a famous photo of him shooting up heroin and getting a blowjob by a woman at the same time. And I think that lady would later go on to be his wife, but in either case, yeah, this is the sort of company that Anselmo found himself in. Some nice, hateful company. It's a little fucked up, but it's kind of funny. I just imagine Trent Reznor, who, around this time in the 90s, I think was, like, working on the Quake soundtrack or something, or producing Marilyn Manson. I'm just imagining him scrambling to give the studio a ring every hour or so, just to make sure that Anselmo and Putnam haven't made a fucking mess of the place with, like, beer cans, disposed fucking heroin needles, the like. I don't know. This was probably a very, very dark time recording all these vocals. And my God, you can tell the album, these vocals, they're just dripping with hate. Sorry, one sec. Just grabbing some water. Yeah. Just oozing with hate. So yeah, on War Nerve, the song War Nerve, Anselmo rails against the media that have been hounding him over all his fuck-ups. As the title of the album implies, he frequently calls out trends and fashions and the followers on multiple tracks of the album, including the title track, Drag the Waters, The Underground in America, and Reprise, Sandblasted Skin. He even lets a bit more bigotry slip with this sort of element of the album. He calls out at one point lesbian love being accepted and right, as if that were like a fashionable craze in the 90s, and not just this broader, if slow, acceptance of LGBT culture by broader society. I don't know, it's a very confusing and somewhat hateful confession, but for everything else he expresses hatred for on this album, he seemingly hates nothing more than himself. Self-loathing and anxiety over his drug addiction permeates the album in the lyrics of tracks like War Nerve, Tens, Living Through Me, Hell's Wrath, and of course the morose suicide note, Duology. Anselmo was in a really dark place at the time, and an absolute scumbag too, but holy hell did he channel all this into something truly wicked and fitting for the extreme metal of the band we're playing now. Speaking of, instrumentally, holy shit! The playing on this album, oh my god, okay. So the title track and Suicide Note Part 2 feature, as I mentioned before, blast beats and absurdly fast riffs reminiscent of a Slayer song, and yet more abrasive guitar notes from Dimebag, but they also have their slower, groovier parts that mark the songs as distinctly Pantera. Other songs are Pantera in a more traditional style. We got Drag the Waters and War Nerve, which are groovy if relentless southern-infused metal songs, which go through multiple time signature shifts. There's Living Through Me, The Underground in America, and Reprise, Sandblasted Skin, which are these more thrash-influenced tracks in the vein of something like Heresy, or even songs like Rise on Vulgar Display of Power. But in the darker, more down-tuned Pantera vernacular the band had developed since, they all really rip and just sound completely vile and haunting and evil. 13 Steps to Nowhere is also really cool. It's mostly built on the swung double kick and tom groove in the drums, which for my money is one of Vinnie Paul's best drum parts, but it also has this really cool industrial sounding, almost bluesy slow breakdown towards the end. And even the slower tracks on this album stick out this time, and I think that's in part because of the greater studio intervention on this album. I don't know, maybe it was because Anselmo was separate from the band and maybe thinking of his own things to do in the studio, but there are more atmospheric vocal overdubs, strange ambient and harsh noises, and even like industrial noise samples, which really sell the utterly evil atmosphere of this album. Excuse me. You got Tens, which is a song you might actually be familiar with if you've ever seen the American dub of the first DBZ Broly movie. It's this slow burn of a metal song about Anselmo's weakening body with some dark breathing and deep vocals lurking ominously in the background, while the rest of the band provide this crunchy doom metal backing. Suicide Note Part 2 is surprisingly a synth-backed 12-string acoustic number. It reminds me a lot of Going to California by Led Zeppelin, honestly, except combined with Dimebag's subtle electric guitar playing and eerie synth effects in the background, it really creates this sort of morose atmosphere. Then, of course, we have Floods, which many consider to be Dimebag's opus. I mean, there are a few contenders for that title, Walk, Cemetery Gates, but this song is honestly something else. It's a ballad in the vein of This Love, but about the apocalypse, with appropriately apocalyptic imagery delivered by Anselmo and his trademark growl, a chilling falsetto, and even these haunting spoken word bits. The riff in this part, which I think is played with a chorus effect, is even more chilling than the one in This Love. But then after the clean part, the song enters this heavy part with a sludgy, pounding trudge, followed by, well, there's no beating the bush, one of the greatest solos Dimebag has ever put to tape, if not the greatest solo. Supposedly, he'd been developing that one on the road for years, ever since the glam days, even. And it's appropriately emotional and chaotic, fitting with the song's apocalyptic nature. Then, as the band continues to pound away into this storm, you got all these thunder effects playing in the background, and Selmo's in deep voices growling "Die," and it's really metal. As this fades into the distance, we get suddenly Dimebag playing this guitar lick against this clean guitar lick against the soothing sounds of rainfall. The apocalypse has come. It's wreaked its havoc, and now all that's left in the song is a whisper of a melody on the wind. Just such a freaking masterclass of a song. I love it. Overall, in my opinion, like I said, this is my favorite Pantera album, and it's Pantera's sound at its apex, in my opinion. All the aggression on this album is finely honed to present one of the most truly haunting metal albums in the mainstream. It's not so much that it captures a band falling apart, though it very much does. It's that, in falling apart, the band's anxieties and fears made the already absurdly heavy sound they've been, becoming for the past few years a bit more raw. if you like metalcore, metal, screamo, grindcore, any sort of deeply pained heavy metal music, odds are you will like this album to some degree. Go listen to it. It's a really underrated gem. S tier for sure. Let's see. I was gonna say, oh, sorry. Just accidentally opening windows that I shouldn't be opening and whatnot. But we're moving on here. The Great Southern Trendkill. So, hear me. Can you see right through me? Tommy, can you feel me? Hey, okay, we're back. Great. So yeah, as I was saying, they were touring in support of Great Southern Trendkill, while all of a sudden, on July 13th, 1996, an hour after a homecoming gig in Texas, Phil overdosed on heroin and was legally dead for about 5 minutes before being resuscitated. Now, the rest of the band knew about Phil's heroin problem. There was no more hiding it, the cat was out of the bag. And, for their part, they tried to be sensitive and cooperative with him. They kind of were walking on more eggshells at this point around him. And Phil, for his part, he knew that he fucked up. And after the band finished touring in support of Trendkill and then the live album, he would commit more to being there with the rest of the band for the recording of their next album. Oh, by the way, I should say, speaking of that live album, that's what this is. I won't be ranking it though. It's got 2 studio tracks, but I won't be ranking it because, again, with these streams, I only really like to focus on like the main studio albums. EPs and live albums are sort of separate than that. But going on, yeah. Anselmo was saying that he would be more committed to recording this new album with the boys. But ultimately, he did continue to relapse. He still refused to get the surgery for the blown distance back, so he continued self-medicating with alcohol, with painkillers, and, again, heroin. Though there was a bit more camaraderie in the sessions for Pantera's next album, especially after the death of the Abbott's mother around this time to lung cancer. Anselmo would still sometimes be missing from the studio, and he reportedly butt heads with the band members of the material sometimes. Eventually though, the dawn of the new millennium would be greeted by Pantera's new album, Reinventing the Steel, released in March of 2000. And that is this album here. The album, it's basically on fire. You got this guy, you might not see it because it's censored, but he's got a brew and he's in a bunch of flames, just doesn't give a fuck. But this album, in a lot of contemporary and retrospective reviews, or interviews, I should say, the band would say that they wanted to go back to the more straight-ahead sound of the Cowboys from Hell period. And for the most part, well, that's what we get, minus the Rob Halford vocal highs. Compared to the past few Pantera albums before it, this one doesn't really move the needle. It's more of a straightforward compilation of heavy tunes, Pantera style. There are less songs about drugs and suicide and, more heavy stuff, and more songs about the band's roots and philosophy. And in a way, it's more introspective, which is honestly an eerie coincidence given that this would be the band's final album, though they didn't know it yet. So how are the songs themselves? Well, they're fine. Hellbound opens the album nice and proper with a heavy drive and an homage to Fort Worth, Texas, before we get Goddamn Electric, which is my personal favorite song on the album. It's got these sorry about that. Are we back? Are we finally back? Sorry about that. I don't know why OBS keeps failing on me right now. I don't know what it is today with OBS and hating me, but I will continue. We are almost done here. We just have one more album to get through, I swear. But anyways, what was I gonna say? Yeah. Yesterday we done with shit, it bangs, revolutionary is my name, incredible riffs, incredible swagger. Then you got the breakneck death rattle, which some of you might remember better as pre-hibernation loop from that one episode of SpongeBob, you know, the one where SpongeBob and Sandy are doing karate, and I think it was they're engaging in a bunch of activities before Sandy has to go hibernate. It's fucking epic that Steven Hillenburg got them to come into the studio and do this. I also like the combination of it makes them disappear and I'll cast a shadow at the end of the album. It's the two songs, they share keys and the former leads in the latter with a literal counting. It's great. Of course, there are your lesser tracks too. You've got to belong to it. It's just kind of a mishmash of heavy ideas, which is forgettable. We'll grind that axe for a long time. It's got a good instrumental, but it's yet another song about how Pantera were keeping it real with metal while other bands were selling out and following trends. I don't know, kind of rude given how many of those bands have paved their path in part with the Pantera sound, you know. At this point, you know, the band were playing with bands like Disturbed, Korn, I think even Limp Bizkit, I think they shared festivals with, like at Ozfest and the like, so, I don't know, it's just kind of rude that they're calling them out and trying to put them on blast, and I don't know. But then you've got Uplift, which is another song about drugs, you know, namely alcohol and its effects. But it's not nearly as contemplative or you know, anxious as songs that have come before it. It's more dumb and metal, honestly. Plus, in general, and this might seem like a minor gripe, but I think that the production, especially the drum sound, brings this album down. This is the first Pantera album since the glam days to not be produced by Terry Date, and I don't know what it is, but the drums sound a lot more flat here. Pantera were better, in my opinion, with a more resonant, open sound that Date provided in his production. Even if the performances are stellar, I don't know, the production, it makes it sound like another late 90s, early 2000s metal album. And that might just be a gripe that I have as a drummer, as somebody who's really, who's really attuned to this sort of stuff, but I don't know. Like I've said before, drum sound, drum technique, it really does make the difference in the middle album. So all in all, Reinventing the Steel is, in hindsight, it's a decent conclusion to Pantera's discography. Not that it was ever intended to be, but it is a great collection of songs that sums up the attitude that the band had exuded since the Cowboys from Hell days. Still, given the evolution of Pantera's sound that had come prior, this album does leave you wanting more. A lot of its songs kick ass, and it is a great listen through, but it smacks more of the band going through the motions in an attempt to keep themselves stable amid the tense interpersonal relationships. I don't know. That's the impression I get. I'm going to give Reinventing the Steel a B. And that's all of Pantera's studio albums. I mean, you might notice here there's one more image down here, but that's just the greatest hits album that would come a few years later. But we will get to that. You know, normally this would be the part in the stream where I ended off, you know, promote future content, you know, celebrate that we've gotten through the discography essentially. But, you know, since the bands that I've covered in the past are all active, the bands I've covered all in the past have all been active. You know, I've been comfortable, you know, sort of, you know, not really, you know, covering what's happened since their last two albums. You know, they're all still out there, they're still kicking ass. Not so with Pantera, unfortunately. These guys have a definitive end, and though I warn you it's not a happy one, I would be doing a disservice to you all by refusing to share it. So, after Reinventing the Steel came out, the band went out and they started killing it live again, but as Pantera did. But Anselmo, he began imbibing more heavily in drugs and alcohol, and once more grew distant from the Abbots. The band were eventually stopped in their tracks in the fall of 2001 when terrorists destroyed New York City's World Trade Center on September 11th, which I think it put a halt to their European tour plans. They were in Ireland at the time, but all flights were just grounded and they couldn't do anything. But it essentially put their tour on kibosh, and they went back to Texas. And the bands, they decided that they would agree to a break. How long that break was, however, I don't think it was something that was ever agreed upon. In 2002 and 2003, Anselmo, he would record and tour with his side projects Down and Superjoint Ritual, the former with Rex Brown, in spite of the fact that, he was always complaining about his back pains to the band. And in fact, that was part of the reason for the hiatus, to manage those pains. And in the meantime, the Abbots, they were looking at this, and they were really anxious to get on with Pantera, and they even released, like I said, that Best Of album in the meantime, but neither their vocalist or bassist seemed due to return. Fed up with Anselmo, they ultimately decided to end the band in 2003. So, yes, much like so many other fucked up things that exist in the world nowadays, you can blame the breakup of Pantera in part on 9/11. The Abbots then decided to carry on with a new band, Damage Plan, with Patrick Blackman of Halford on vocals and Bob Zilla on bass, and then they released the album Newfound Power in 2004. I think I was listening to this one a bit last night as I was working for the historical context parts of this stream, and it's all right. It's a decent metal album with some pretty good performances, but it lacks a lot of that southern fire, which really makes a lot of Pantera so engrossing. I don't know. All the while, though, Damage Plan, while they were touring, while they were promoting this new album, the Abbots were trading barbs in the metal press with Phil Anselmo, and each party, they'd eventually take turns seeking blame on the other for the downfall of Pantera. But it would eventually culminate in Phil Anselmo's interview with Metal Hammer, published in their December 2004 issue, in which he's quoted as saying that Daryl, and I quote, deserves to be beaten severely. Now, under any other circumstance, this would just be a dickish statement made by an overly pompous frontman of a defunct band that only contributed a fourth of their sonic power. But unfortunately, the story gets worse. On December 8th, 2004, while Damage Plan were playing a gig in Columbus, Ohio, 25-year-old Nathan Gale rushed the stage with a gun, fatally shooting Dimebag and 4 other people, and was looking for Vinnie Paul before being gunned down by the police officer who arrived on the scene. Though Gale had his own suite of mental issues, including schizophrenia, and there's no evidence that Pantera's split motivated his actions, he was also fixated on Pantera and thought that they had ripped off the lyrics from him, so it's not like Vinnie and Dimebag were safe from his rampage. There was suspicion that Anselmo's quotation in Metal Hammer may have influenced Gale in an example of stochastic terrorism, but that was later nixed upon further investigation. Still, the damage was done. Dimebag Darrell was dead, and with him, any hopes for a Pantera reunion. Now, a whole suite of famous metal musicians, and former bandmates too, Rex Brown and even Terry Glaze, showed up to the funeral service held weeks later to pay their respects, as Dimebag was buried in a kiss casket with Eddie Van Halen's yellow and black guitar from the back of Van Halen 2 even. But conspicuously absent was Phil Anselmo, who was expressly barred from his longtime girlfriend, Rhea Haney. Yeah, the rifts between those two camps, it never healed. I don't think it ever really will heal. So where are they now, the remainder of Pantera? Or at least those left in the wake of all this tragedy? Well, Vinnie Paul would go on to form his own label, Big Boom Records, and play with the supergroup Hell Yeah until his unfortunate passing in 2018 from a heart disease. Seriously, pour one out for Jerry Abbott. You know, the country producer, the man who's the dad of both of these dudes. Yeah, poor man lost his wife and both of his sons in the span of 20 years. That can't be too, that's gotta be weighing on him. I just feel awful. Rex Brown would go on a tour and record the Down some more before blowing up his relationships with both the Abbott camp and Anselmo by putting out a tell-all autobiography in 2013, which sniped at them both. He's since come to regret the book and blames its more insulting, inaccurate passages on his co-writer and publisher. Anselmo, well, after finally getting his back repaired in 2005, he's been doing more things with Down, Superjoint Ritual, and as a solo artist on his indie label Housecore Records, while also still being a mean, ugly son of a bitch in the process. In 2016, at the annual tribute/charity event Dime Bash, held in honor of Dimebag Darrell, Anselmo, at the end of the gig, raised his arm in a Nazi salute and screamed, "White Power." He gave a few conflicting reasons for this later, from the claim that he was making a joke about white wine that they were serving backstage, which Rob Flynn of Machine Head, who was also there, disputes, to the claim that he was being heckled during his entire set by teens who were calling him a racist, which, as far as I can tell, is not corroborated by video evidence. In any case, he's a bit of an unrepentant shitbag, so as good as he's been as a vocalist in Pantera, I have absolutely no interest in paying attention to his works after the fact. So, that's that, you know, kind of a bummer of an ending, I know, but sometimes these musical stories aren't tied up with neat bows, but get their entrails strewn about by tragedies which happen after the fact. At the very least, the legacy of Pantera's music remains embedded in almost all metal nowadays. Something which would make the Abbott brothers, who lived and breathed metal music their entire lives, eternally grateful if they were still around today. May they rest in peace. But yeah, that's it. That's all of Pantera's history. That's all their studio albums reviewed and ranked. Thank you guys so much for joining me once again for this stream. It's a bit of a shorter one than the past two, I know, but I guess that was by design. I could not, for my own health, do another 18-album discography. What was it? It would have been my, third bi-weekly thing in a row. No way. I can't do that again. But, I don't know. I might try to do a bit bigger of a discography next time. I think I settled on Pantera for this time because when I was doing the discography for Judas Priest last time, I don't know, I think I stumbled across, the fact that Pantera opened for Judas Priest on their Painkiller tour, and I remember the story that Rob Halford told about meeting Dimebag Darrell for the first time. He was watching this Toronto public access station that was interviewing Dimebag, and I think Dime was wearing a Judas Priest British Steel shirt at the time, so Halford called down the studio, was like, "Yo, is Dimebag still there?" And he went over, said hi to him, and then later that night performed a few Priest covers with the band, with Pantera. So I don't know, there was that, but I don't know. It's also just intriguing, Pantera's evolution from, another band who was influenced by the metal bands of the day and the sounds, trying to chase the commercial success that way, going from that to following their own path and basically blazing a new chapter ahead in American heavy metal in the process. American heavy pedal, I don't know what that is. Yeah, no, I was happy to do this. It's Pantera have a very interesting and storied history, in spite of the fact that they were only around for well, at their height, doing what they did and innovating for 10 years. But I'm glad you all joined me for it, and I hope you learned something from this stream. And I hope you're inspired maybe to go listen to some of these albums, including the glam ones. You know, don't sleep on Glamtera. Not everything that they recorded back then is bad, but, you know, to be warned, of course. Anyways, you know, I'm gonna wrap things up for the stream today. If you liked what you saw today at all, please do like, subscribe, you know, ring the notification bell, leave a comment, you know, maybe say how you rank the Pantera discography, or, you know, talk about what you think of my rankings. You know, anything helps. Anything to help the channel grow and allow me to get you guys more, or allow to get you guys more metal and video gaming content. Not only to you guys, but, you know, to a wider crowd too. I want to spread the love. But my next stream, I think, oh boy, Friday is going to be a bit of a busy day to me. Bit of a busy day for me. I'm going to be playing the original Doom. We're going to be finishing that with episode 3. And then later that night, I'm going to be playing some Among Us with other VTubers. Another collab, which I'm really looking forward to, you know, getting to know some more VTubers over some nice quality Amogus, determining who's sus and who's not. So look forward to Friday. It's going to be a very busy day for me. Anyways, with all that being said, oh wait, no, I'm not ready to end things off yet. I should say, if you're only now coming to the stream, or you came to the stream late, I will go back later and add in timestamps for each of the albums I cover on the stream today, in case you want to see my opinions for each. But yeah, anyways, so that I'm not keeping you waiting for the archive for much longer, I might as well end my stream now. So, thank you all so much for coming by another episode of Rezi Reviews. This has been your host, Rezi Reviews, and I will see you all next time. Goodbye!